If you have a created thing, you need a creator for the created thing. But then that leaves us with a paradox. If every created thing needs a creator, who created the creator? The transmigration of the soul, based on your conduct, you're judged. And that concept is central to Islam.
No,
the last day and the judgment.
We don't believe in reincarnation. That is completely and utterly false. Alhamdulillah.
Okay.
What's your name, by the way?
Bill.
Bill. Okay, I'm Hashim.
Hashim.
Yeah, I know we had a discussion a while back.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we did, yeah.
Couple of years ago.
Yeah, the issue is obviously there's a lot of people here, so it's difficult to be heard.
Yeah.
So sometimes you
That's
have
why
to
I moved
raise your
here.
voice.
Yeah.
So if you are recording, if it sounds like we're shouting, it's because there's people here. We're trying to be heard.
Somebody needs to be a timekeeper. Volunteer, inshallah.
Yeah, please be fair. No bias, please.
Yeah. No extra 2 seconds, yeah?
And I think the other ground rules is no ad hominem attacks. I do not attack you, your personality, your character. I'm also not attacking Islam. I'm not anti-Islam or anything like that. Also, I would respect if you do not make personal attacks about me, because you know I'm not. No one's paying me to be here, and so I'm just doing this out of a little bit of goodwill.
Oh yeah, you think somebody's paying us?
Well, no one's paying you either. No one's paying me.
Alhamdulillah, that's good.
So
yeah.
let's be nice to each other and let's feel good about the fact that we're
Let's
here.
keep it civil.
Be nice. Let's be nice.
That's civil.
Yeah. Let's be nice. Because we're all here, you know, no one's paying us to be here, so we might as well be nice to each other because that's what we're living for,
Okay.
isn't it?
So before we start, I want to know, because I'm a Muslim.
Yes.
What do you consider yourself to be? Do you believe in God?
I would say you'd probably describe me as agnostic. I have been to mosques. I've had many close Muslim friends. I've also read the Quran. I've read Arab history. And recently I've begun interested in the origins of religion, including Islam, but also Christianity.
Okay.
So recently I was reading the Gospels as part of the Bible, and I've read a lot of history.
So you reject
Arab history.
Do you reject God?
No. I said as an agnostic doesn't mean you reject God. What agnostic means...
I know what agnostic means, but do you reject God?
I don't reject God, no.
Okay, so you actually believe in God?
I would say it depends on how you define God.
How do you define it?
Well, this is the question. It depends on how you define God.
Well, I
God
can only
has
ask you, right?
God has not been, most philosophers, they study it over here in these universities.
Yeah.
There's no agreed or generally accepted definition of God in most universities or most dictionaries. It's open to dispute. How one person defines God, another may define differently.
Let me check my dictionary.
If you take, for example, in Islam or the Islamic tradition, there are different interpretations of what God is. If you go into the Jewish tradition, or what we call the Jewish tradition, the Old Testament, there is a different attempt at defining what God is. It's a person actually speaking to Moses, telling Moses what to do. Moses doesn't do what he's told. God is angry at him and punishes him. It's like his dad, essentially.
Okay. So you said
there's other definitions of God where God is like the sun.
Yeah.
You know,
my dictionary actually has a meaning of God. If you want, you can read it.
I agree there's a dictionary definition.
But you said there wasn't one.
No, I didn't say that. I said
it's on camera.
There is no generally accepted definition in terms of dictionaries and in terms of encyclopedias of what God means. So for example, you read out the definition there, I'll explain what the problem is with that definition.
Okay, it says here, the creator and the ruler of the universe and source of all moral authority, the supreme being. Is that good enough for you?
No, this is why.
So where's the deficiency?
This is where the problems are.
Yeah,
First of all, you said creator. Yep. If you go back to that, you said supreme being.
Yeah.
So define supreme being.
Means he's supreme authority over everything, and he's the one who is in charge of everything. In terms of like, when it comes to morality, that's where it comes from. He's the source of that, and he's also the sovereign. You know, he's a sovereign, almighty.
Okay. So, I mean, most of us would agree who is in charge of Britain.
Yes. So, no, just fill that. I don't like big bottles.
So most of us would agree who's in charge.
Thank you.
Who's in charge of Britain? And we'd say, okay, maybe Keir Starmer, maybe King Charles. In what sense can we say the supreme being is in charge of everything?
You heard what I said, right?
Yeah.
Did you not hear what I said? I said supreme being of all existence. Not only of this country, a supreme being who is sovereign over everything that's been created. That means every creation, from the minutest to the largest galaxies or universes, if you want to call them, all cosmos, all of it.
Okay.
Now you cannot tell me there is actually an entity which is supreme above him. He's like the ultimate authority. So for me, that is a supreme being.
Okay.
You know, the Quran actually gives a very good definition. You said the religions don't. The Quran has Surah Al-Ikhlas, which is 112, chapter 112 of the Quran.
Yes.
And it says very clearly that Allah is one and unique. He is the one who is not dependent on anyone, and everyone's dependent on him. He is As-Samad. It says, Lam yalid wa lam yulad. He is neither begotten nor does he beget. That means he doesn't have any parents nor any children. He's not in need of anyone. And the last verse of that particular chapter 112, it says there's nothing like unto him. Okay? وَلَمْ يَقُلْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ. There's another verse in the Quran which emphasizes the last part here. It says, when it describes Allah as there's nothing like unto him. So, you know, anything that you can imagine, anything that you have seen, anything that you have experienced, Allah is unlike any of that. So the Quran is very clear and concise, unlike the Hindu scriptures, which give you different definitions. I didn't say you were, because you mentioned about the definition in different religions.
Okay,
don't get, get personal when I say Hinduism. Okay, I don't know. It's because the thing is, Hindus
Yes.
and even the Christians, when they talk about God, they have different definitions. So you'll have Unitarian Christians, you'll have Hindus mentioning different supreme gods based on their sampradaya, based on their tradition. But Islam doesn't have that problem, even amongst the different sects of Islam. For example, Shia and Sunni, we have the same God. We do not differentiate between who the God is. We do not differentiate with who the last messenger and prophet is. So when it comes to the core, you know, when the Muslims when somebody becomes a Muslim, they say the Shahada, the declaration of faith. The declaration of faith rejects all gods and says Allah is the only one worthy of worship. And then he says Prophet Muhammad, peace be, blessing be upon him, is the last messenger. All Muslims, regardless of the regardless of the sect within Islam, they confirm this.
Yes.
So we have a very consistent understanding of God and the obedience to Allah and the Rasul. This is very consistent, alhamdulillah. Okay. Go on.
So that's a bit more than 1 minute. That's why I said 1 minute's not enough, maybe 2
you can take 2 minutes if you want, no problem.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what I was trying to do is I was trying to establish a clear definition of God. And you gave lots of quotes from the Quran, and they're very good quotes, they're very beautiful. In fact, the Quran is one of the most beautifully written and poetic books ever written, and that's why it's such a strong belief. And there's a love for the Quran as well, which I'm sure many of you share. The problem is, however, that the definition is not sufficiently precise. Let me give you an example. If we speak in terms of supreme being, do we mean somebody that is all-powerful? So, for example, I gave the example of, say, Keir Starmer, Prime Minister. Keir Starmer leads the majority party in the House of Commons. So they can put forward a piece of legislation and they can say tomorrow, okay, we're going to cut VAT by 10%. You all go to the shop tomorrow, the price you pay for all the stuff in the shop is going to be not 10% less, but it will be about 2 or 3% less, yes? Now that's the power. So Keir Starmer has the power to do that. His party in Parliament has the power to do that. Now we've said one of the definitions of God is all-powerful. So does God have the power to do that, what Keir Starmer can do? Can God go out there and lower VAT for all of you? In fact, there's something also I would like very much, many of you maybe agree, let's lower taxes and let's increase spending. Let's put more spending on the schools, let's go out and have more spending on the hospitals. Does God have the power to do that? And if God does not have the power to do that, he's not all-powerful.
Are you done?
Yes.
Okay. Why are you comparing God to his creation? I very clearly stated that Allah is unlike his creation. So if Allah has given the free will to Keir Starmer or even to you or to me, that doesn't mean that he's not powerful. The fact that he has given you this, the fact that he's created you, that itself is his power. Can you create another human being without any other resources? Without your parents, without any cells, without any DNA? No, you can't. The DNA itself shows that this is something which is miraculous creation, because the DNA is a code, and any code has a coder. So we know that God is not only precise in his creation, but it's actually showing intelligence, because a code requires intelligence. You can't write a code without intelligence. All of this proves to us that God does exist. So I don't know why you're still an agnostic when you look around the world, yes, you try to look away from the parliament, you realize that this legislation which is given to the parliament or the people elected by the people in this country is a legislation which tomorrow Piers Starmer is not there, somebody else is making the rules. Tomorrow the VAT might go down or up, who knows? That doesn't mean that they are all powerful. It just shows that they have been given this legislative power by the people, for the people, of the people in a democracy, yeah? But no one will say that Piers Starmer is a god. So please do not make these false equivocations with the creation when you're talking about the Creator and the Almighty. I still want to know from you why you do not believe, why you're uncertain about God. Because an agnostic is basically uncertain. They might be aware of who God is, but he's still uncertain. 1.5 minutes, that's fine. Carry on.
Okay, great, thank you. So thank you for answering, and that's a very good answer that you gave, that Keir Starmer is a creation of God and not God himself, but that creates a paradox. Keir Starmer has the power to cut these taxes, yes, we agreed that, but when you asked about whether God has that power, then we're a bit hesitant. We're not sure, does God have that power to cut the taxes and increase the spending? Because we all think that's a good idea to do that. Because we want better schools, we want better hospitals, but we don't want higher taxes. There seems to be some objective law out there that says you cannot increase spending without increasing taxes, either directly or indirectly. Whether they're going to go and put the VAT on your spending, or they're going to put income tax on when you earn the money, or they're going to use inflation tax to erode the value of your money, prices of everything goes up. There's some kind of law out there that says that you can't do this, increase spending and lower taxes at the same time. If God doesn't have the power to do that, how can God be the supreme being? And this is the problem that we've got. We've got to define what God is before we can go out there and use the concept of God in order to say what we should and shouldn't do, what we should and should not believe.
Okay. So you see, I've given the definition of God already. The fact that you're still comparing God to a creation, I don't know why you're doing that. It's false equivocation. Let me give you a definition which probably you might agree with. God is a necessary being. What that means is that doesn't matter what universe, what existence, he is unchanging. He cannot be otherwise. Us human beings are creation. Yes, we are not a necessary being. Without us, the universe will still exist. Without him, nothing will exist. So as a necessary being, he is not contingent or dependent on anyone. Everyone else is dependent. So without giving us a lesson in economics, maybe you can tell us more about God from your perspective and focus on God rather than the creation, please.
Okay. Well,
that's only 45 seconds, but I'll give you that time. No problem.
So we're trying to get an agreed definition, and then we can work from that agreed definition of what God is.
Yeah.
We started with the phrase supreme being. So I'm trying to put accurate specifics on what a supreme being is. We're saying that there's some kind of powerful physical laws out there that not even the supreme being can break. Does this include, one of them is about spending without taxes, but there are others, laws of physics. So for example, one of the laws of physics is force equals mass times acceleration. So you want to accelerate an object, say your car's broken down, you've got to get it to the petrol station, it's run out of petrol, you've got to push it. You've got to apply a force to accelerate this massive mass of a car. Car weighs about 1 ton. Can God come along and make it easier for you to do that? Let's say you have an old lady. The old lady has to get home, it's dark, it's not safe for her to be out on her own when it's dark, in the countryside. Can God send something down to that old lady's car, and instead of it being a 1-ton car that's very hard to push, it's now lighter to push? And if God doesn't have that power either, in what sense is God all-powerful? Okay,
I don't think you have answered the question regarding the necessary being. You completely ignored that, even though I made it very clear what it was. So I would hope that when you get your chance, please address the point I made rather than continuing with economics or cars. Because the thing is, the forces of nature, everything, even your ability, even if you were a president or prime minister and you're raising the taxes or whatever it is, it doesn't mean God can't do it. The fact you're ignoring is that God has given you that ability to even be a human being. Because if you were born as an insect, which God had every ability to create you as an insect, you wouldn't be paying taxes now, would you? So you're still dependent on God. What you need to understand is that everything depends on God. God doesn't depend on anything. If you're going to, let's use that as the standard of God. How about that?
Okay. So what you're saying is God is an independent thing and we are the dependent things.
Yes.
God has, I think you mean free will.
No, God gave us free will. Of course God has free will, by definition. Yeah.
Okay, so God has free will.
Yeah.
We do or we don't have free will?
We are talking about God or us?
Us. God has free will.
I thought we were talking about God.
God has free will.
Yeah. So let's talk about the dependency first before we divert.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do now.
Yeah. No, divert. You're diverting because I asked you about dependence and independence. So independent means what? You're not contingent on anything.
Yes.
Are you contingent on something?
Many things.
Good. Is God, by the definition I gave you, contingent on anything?
According to the definition you just gave me, yes, I have to say you've just said he's independent of everything else, so that's what you just said.
So do you agree that he's independent?
This is what I'm trying to establish. That we've got laws of physics, we've got laws of economics that no one seems to be able to break, and that would appear to mean that God is not independent of these laws. God is dependent on these laws.
No.
God cannot break these
Who
laws.
told you that God is dependent? For you, I don't know which realm you're talking about, whether from a Hindu perspective, Christian perspective, or Muslim perspective.
I'm not Hindu. You keep talking.
I didn't say you were. Why do you always feel guilty when I mention Hindu?
Okay, carry on.
I think he probably is.
Carry on.
He's projecting
Okay, we
it.
can talk about Hinduism.
Every time I mention Hindu, he feels offended.
We can talk about Hinduism if you want.
No,
I'm
I said
not an expert on Hinduism.
I mentioned
That's
Christian
all I'm
as well.
saying. I'm not an expert.
I mentioned.
on
Why are you getting
Hinduism.
it?
Okay, go on.
I don't know. You get defensive every time I mention the term Hindu. You get defensive.
No, you're the one mentioning it like 10 times. I don't know why. Anyway, carry
I
on.
mentioned Christian in the same breath,
Okay, carry on.
but you only capitalize on Hindu.
Okay, carry on.
Maybe he is Hindu.
Carry on. I'm not. I'm not.
I know. You don't have to say it so many times.
Okay,
You're not.
carry
We got it the first time. But please don't get defensive when I use the term Hindu.
carry on.
I'm saying based
No,
on
there's
religion.
nothing wrong with Hinduism, but I'm not Hindu. Carry on.
Well, you would be a Hindu if there was something wrong. There wasn't anything wrong. Okay,
carry
so
on.
independent means he doesn't need. He existed before the universe. Before these laws of physics even were, in the universe or applied to the universe, he existed.
Yes.
So clearly God is independent of even the universe. Any creation, because the universe is a creation of God.
Okay.
Even the laws that have been put in the universe, they are basically his giving. He's the one who put them there. For example, the distance from the sun that we are, and the distance of the moon, the distance of even Jupiter, all of them are so precise that if we were slightly off, we would be destroyed. If Jupiter was slightly off, many meteors would come down here. According to many scientists, they said 10,000 meteors every year are being, it's acting as a shield from 10,000 meteors, which would have destroyed the Earth. So everything is in its precise location. Like I mentioned, the DNA, precise code.
Yes.
So God is not dependent on anything.
Yes.
Everything depends on Him.
Yes.
So I think you should take it from there.
Okay.
As standard of God.
So one of the things that you've mentioned is created and the creator, and you've implied a very famous thing, you've all heard it before, if you have a created thing, you need a creator for the created thing. But then that leaves us with a paradox. If every created thing needs a creator, who created the creator?
Is that your question? Yes. That's it, no? Only got 17 seconds.
Can I interfere? But I'm still waiting for your definition of God. So like that
He doesn't have one.
I started off with a position that it is difficult to get.
Please, I am. No beginning end. I am.
Thank you, madam.
Unfortunately, that's a bit vague, madam.
So,
but yeah, I am.
You know that question you asked, who created the creator? That implies you're looking for creation. Because anything that is created is a creation by definition.
Yes.
Allah is uncreated. He is the first cause. And He is independent.
Yes.
As-Samad, which is the Arabic term for that.
Yes.
Very precise. We are not like even trying to deviate from the point. I've stuck to this point from the very beginning.
Yes.
I don't know why you gave so many different. First you compared to the creation. I said don't compare to creation. Then you compared to the laws of physics. I said laws of physics are dependent on Allah, not the other way around. I told you the universe itself is dependent on Allah. Okay. So anyone, for example, if the baker bakes bread, would you ask who baked the baker? Because by definition, the baker would bake the bread. Nobody bakes him. Just because he bakes the bread doesn't make that he needs to have a baker. So
okay, but you
what we are saying,
you
yeah.
do have causation.
Yes.
Let's say one day you wake up in the morning, your car doesn't work. You call the mechanic, and the mechanic comes and he spends 1 hour looking at your car, and at the end of the 1 hour, he then says, there's no reason, it just doesn't work. Would you accept that?
I'll go to another mechanic.
No.
Simple.
No.
I don't know where you go to.
What most people would say is,
Mend your car.
no, my friend.
Yes.
You looked at the car for 1 hour. You don't know what the problem is. There is a problem. You just don't know what it is. I'm going to go out and get another mechanic.
That's what I said.
Yes, that's what you said. So you would not accept that.
Okay.
So this is the same point.
What's the point you're making?
Let me finish.
Yeah, sure.
We said no interruptions, yeah? So we talked about the baker, and we said the baker bakes the bread, but you wouldn't ask whether we bake the baker.
Who baked
But
it?
what we could ask, is what led this baker to this profession. Why did he choose to be a baker? Why not a carpenter? Why not a fisherman? Why did he choose this particular profession? And then we can go further back in time and further back in time. In the same way, you all have a parent, yes? So you've all been born to a mother and a father, and you have a parent. Okay, back to you.
Yeah. I really don't know what point you're trying to make here, because
I ran out of time.
for you to say
I ran
that
out of time, I think.
yeah, for you to say that God needs a role, God, I gave you all the definition of what God is according to the Surah Al-Ikhlas. Yes? I showed you, the point you really are not addressing here, and this is the third time we have this chance. Show me how God is dependent, and then we can move forward.
Okay.
Because that is the key point you need to address.
Okay.
Everything, look, you look at the universe, everything that begins to exist has a cause. Everything that begins to exist
Yes.
has a cause. Allah never began to exist. He is the cause. Okay? Now, that shows that he's independent of causation. Everything else is dependent on some form of cause. So they need a cause. For example, the universe, according to scientists, started expanding something like 13.8 billion years ago. Yeah? So based on them, it began to exist at some point. Therefore, it must have a cause. What is the cause of the universe? Let's start with that one.
Okay. Well, unfortunately, the Big Bang Theory is called a theory because it's not an established scientific fact. There is not a lot of evidence to prove this theory, and by definition it can never be proven because there are no witnesses that were there when this alleged Big Bang happened. 13.8 billion years is a date that's been picked because the original date was 3 billion years, but they worked out that the Earth is 5 billion years, so the universe is younger than the Earth. It's an obvious problem. They then added on 10 billion because they thought, well, there's got to be a reasonable amount before the Earth, and then that didn't sound precise, 13 billion. So they added on 0.8 billion to make it 13.8 billion. That sounds precise. People will accept that. But that's the true story of where the Big Bang 13.8 billion came from. So that whole theory is just a theory. It's not a scientific fact. But force equals mass times acceleration, that is a scientific fact. And the question is, how is God independent? Because if God is independent and God has free will...
You should have addressed that at the beginning, but you went into Big Bang.
You raised it.
Yeah, I did raise it, but the thing is, I think your background is history, definitely not science, from the way what you just mentioned about the Big Bang. I don't think you know what a theory is. A theory is something that is peer-reviewed. A theory is not something that they just made up. It is peer-reviewed by evidence, not without evidence. Have you heard of the microwave background radiation?
Yes.
Yes, so that is the evidence. The evidence shows that this is something that they can trace back to that time, and that's how they got the time. It's not something that is random, or they just said 13.8 billion sounds good. They calculated. So if the universe is expanding at this rate, they basically said, okay, if it's expanding at this rate, it must be this small at certain time, and they calculated that. And this is how they came to it. So there is evidence for what the age of and this is approximate. No one says it's precise. So anyway, going back to my question, you have evaded like the fourth time now. Show me anything that begins to exist has a cause.
Okay.
And show me otherwise, like that doesn't have
I think we do need 2 minutes each to finish up.
No, I think we can do it, because otherwise we'll just go into a tangent.
So we're on the Big Bang because we're talking about what caused the Big Bang. That's how we've come
Please,
to
with
the
all
Big
due
Bang.
respect, answer about the dependence, independence. Come on.
No,
That's more
you
important.
interrupted.
But I asked you 4 times. You evaded that question. It is only fair you answer the question rather than evade it.
Yeah, okay.
So please answer the question about dependence.
I'm trying to do that. I'm trying to do that.
Okay.
So in terms of independence and dependence, we need to define what we mean by independence. And if we mean independence means I have free will. Let's say I'm dependent. Well, I have lots of pressures. Let's say you have a job. You have to be you have to be there on time. You have to get the job done at the appropriate level of productivity. You're now in a dependent relationship with your boss. tells you what to do at the relevant standards, and then you have to obviously get your reward, which is your pay. Does God have a dependent relationship with the laws of physics? Yes or no? Can he change them? Can he change force equals mass times acceleration, or that expending must equal taxation?
He still hasn't answered the question. You know, I'm getting tired now. This will be the last time I'm going to say this. I mentioned about causation, which shows dependency. If you have a cause, then you're dependent. He keeps talking about mass and all that. I said even before the universe was created, he was independent. I don't know why you would actually keep repeating yourself when I told you the answer and addressed that point specifically several times. Look, because you're unsure of the definition of God, don't project that on us, because we gave you a precise when I say we, I'm not talking royal we, this is the Muslim understanding of the definition of what God is, who Allah is, because Allah himself defined who is. Unlike other religions, we don't have contradictory definitions of who God is. It's very clear because the Quran is very clear. And he gave us this. So causation is the one, I told you that Allah doesn't have a cause, everything else has a cause. Anything that begins to exist has a cause. And Allah did not begin to exist. So he has no cause. That's why he's independent. Now, this is the last time I'm going to give you a chance, because if you don't answer that, if you don't address it, then it's
I've got the problem that you're claiming that you've got.
Go on.
I've asked you multiple times to answer the question, and you have not done that. The question that you yourself have basically talked in terms of supreme being. You talked in terms of independent and dependent. I've raised the question over and over again, can God change the laws of physics? Can he change the laws of economics? You've refused to answer the question. If you answer the question, then we can move on to the next point. If you don't answer the question, then we're kind of stuck.
No, we're talking
You've
about
also raised the whole issue about greater and created. You raised the thing about the Big Bang. There are a lot of problems about the Big Bang theory. Microwave radiation is in dispute. Comes from a guy called Stephen Hawking. He's supposed to have dictated a book with his eyelids in 1980, if you can believe that. So there are a lot of problems out there in terms of what we believe. There is fiction and there is declaration.
Okay.
There is declaration of what we call fictional points. And by declaration, we do not have proof. What I'm asking is proof. I'm asking about evidence.
Your time's up. Okay, look, so he hasn't answered about dependence, independence again. He went to the laws of physics. I said God himself put the laws there. So for example, if 2 plus 2 is equal to 4, why would he say is equal to 5? Because that is the truth. Why would he change the truth? These laws of physics, the fact that you have this consistent law within this created universe shows that there is intelligence behind it. I'm saying even before, even if you remove the universe, remove the laws of physics, he would still remain independent. That is my answer. I've given it several